people with the more populist voice, the people on the right side, need a better way to send their message to the people. How do you think we can approach that, gentlemen?
Well, I talked to one of our neighbors who was from California, just saying, I won't mention any names, and they fell for the propaganda. They felt that, ooh, abortion, they're coming for that right. It's not a right. Never was, but the left convinced of that. One of the things I'm fed up with is this whole, every time they say this, like it just shows their ignorance. We're protecting democracy. We don't have a democracy. We have a republic, a representative republic, a constitutional republic. We do not have a democracy. And so every time they talk about that, protecting it means absolutely nothing. It's an affectation that is artificial and construct and means nothing. And so every time they say that, it's meant to scare people, and it worked. And so part of this has to be an education of the fact that what they say means nothing. The abortion issue, while it's something I'm sure people will want to debate, it's, each state has to resolve that for itself. There was never any constitutional right of abortion. Never existed. So part of this has to essentially you have to dismantle their narrative and their lies. And Biden lies constantly. One of the other big things is climate change. Let's just talk about that for a second. The earth will not fundamentally change in any way regarding human existence on the planet, regarding whether for the next probably 1,000 years. And the net direction of climate is that we're going into a cooling period. All indications are by geologic time, no matter what man does, he will not be able to prevent the next chilling of the planet. These things happen irregardless of us. The biggest determinant factor is the sun. And last time I checked, there's no technology that will either be able to turn up or turn down the amount of light coming from the sun. So the whole left construct of climate change control is beyond insane. So every time I hear that, it just drives me nuts as someone who has a degree in this. It's all the absorbing of scientific process and politicizing it for benefit of a certain narrative, the narrative which is fundamentally false. So these things to me drive, as someone who is fact-based, drives me nuts. So it tells me, Chris, that we've got to figure out a way to break through and use emotion to point these things out. That, no, I'm sorry, you're not going to die in 10 years from climate. Yes, right. Indeed. The open border and fentanyl is a weapon of mass destruction, and you will sooner suffer the ill effects of fentanyl than you will from any effects of climate change. Just saying. Nobody's died from climate change. Thousands have died from fentanyl, and we've got to change that messaging. And that's something that I think some of the best minds in the business need to think about. But it's very clear that narrative was effective. It worked on low information voters. And the way to counter that is to go back and address this at the level of understanding of most voters, which means you have to essentially reduce the details of the message, but make sure they understand that there are things wrong, and you will suffer from those things unless you can understand you need to vote a different way than you have in the past.
It's important to appeal to the voters' emotions in a lot of ways, because they will stay home if they don't feel like getting up and voting either.
Exactly.
And this is another issue. When I was watching, I'm in New York, so I was watching the Governor Hochul, the Governor Hochul commercials, where she was saying, Zeldin is going to take away your abortion rights. You're not going to be able to have an abortion. It's going to be horrible. When everybody really should know that in New York, that's never going to change anyway. But that was one of her big points.
That's right.
And the fact is, taking away your rights, and the other term was election denier. That's another one. Election denier.
That worked very well.
Well, what it worked because it triggered the phrase Holocaust denier. And I hate to put it that way, but that's exactly what the message is all about, to tie people who question the integrity of the new rules that were made in 2020 to, and it was said, fortify the elections, to take those people who questioned that or wanted to maybe clean that up for the next election you tie them in with people who are running around with skinheads, screaming around and vandalizing synagogues because they're deniers of the Holocaust. That's horrible, but that's the message that seemed to work for them. I'm not,
Yep.
I am a proponent of playing fight fire with fire, but I also like to at least keep some semblance of a high road on that same vein while they go very, very low. Jay, what are
Now,
your thoughts on that?
The Democrats will always go low. So you have to come into it knowing that. By the way, going back to the first point, the the Republicans keep reminding everyone that it's a republic because it's the name of their party. The Democrats keep calling it a democracy because it's the name of their party. It's simple branding, and so they're always pushing the democracy piece of it. And the truth is that the man in the street thinks of it as a democracy in the sense that you get to vote. To them, that's all that word means. So as far as that goes. Now on abortion, uh, abortion at the end of the day is not going to be a big issue going forward. Even if they won some of these referendums, but abortion is a momentary issue because the Supreme Court just decided it. Going forward, longer term, the Democrats are not going to keep bringing up abortion every 4 years. It's not in their interest anymore. And so right now there was an emotional moment that they could jump on that. But basically, abortion is still legal in a lot of places. At the same time, I don't mean to diminish what the Supreme Court accomplished. I just attended a meeting this morning of Republican strategists, and where they showed that there's now 5,000 kids a year more being born in Texas every year since the time they stopped the abortion. So it definitely has an impact. If you make them less convenient, there's going to be less abortions. So, but let's get back to the climate issue and finish with that. The climate issue is really the classic. We have to really study that, how they took a thing this phony and made it into a reality that the whole world just moves forward year after year. The United Nations, they all figured out that it's in their interest somehow, governments, to with this phony climate crisis, because that always is a blank check for them to back up any program they want to do and say there's something to do with the climate. When I wrote a series of articles about climate in the late 90s, when it was a big issue, not long after Al Gore's book came out. And a lot of the old climate websites have my articles from there. And I basically try to boil it down to a very simple point, which I said that they're telling us, A, that the world is in danger from climate, and B, that it can be fixed. Those two things cannot both be true, because
Right.
by the time there would already be indications that somehow through driving cars or flying planes, whatever it is, we overturned the climate to the extent that you can identify already statistically. By that point, you're not going to be able to reverse it. So, but of course, the whole premise is ridiculous. We had ice ages, we had stone ages, this world has gone through everything. It has in it built-in abilities, whether you believe in God or you don't, however you want to define it to yourself. It has a built-in ability to respond to situations, all kinds of fail-safes, and it keeps itself going. And it's not going to, go down because you're driving cars or flying planes. Just nonsense. So if you can't get your head out of that, crazy space, there's very little hope that we're going to win you over with logic about anything.
Well, I think I'd like to believe, Jay, it's self-apparent that the world hasn't ended or will not end in the time frame that AOC said it would. It's not going to. And the fact is that the left is very good about using propaganda, and they take a little bit of something and they run with it. I mean, the language they use about the world ending, about how to your point, you give the governments money and they'll fix it. No, they won't. No, there's absolutely no way. Even if it's bad, if you go with what they're saying is true, if you accept what they're saying about the climate, CO2 is true, which is not. CO2 is a gas, it's not a pollutant. If you accept their premise, not a thing they're proposing would actually stop what they're saying would happen from the CO2. It's completely disconnected, but no one is willing to call them out. So that's the other thing we should do, is start calling them out. And this is what I'd like to do publicly. I'd love to be in a debate on CNN, just saying,
That would
where
work.
someone says this and I say, that's nonsense. This is why it's nonsense. And the other thing too, Jay, you've heard me say this before. I don't know how they get away with using a Nazi term for their gun control. Assault rifle, assault weapon came from Sturmgewehr, which was a term that Hitler himself pinned. So it's kind of like, how is it you all are constantly using a term that Adolf Hitler personally used to describe a weapon he thought would win them World War II? How do they get away with that?
Thank you for joining us for this portion of our Thought to Action live stream presented by Project Sentinel and the London Center for Policy Research. You can find this in its entirety on our Patreon page, patreon.com/thought-to-action. You can join us there, patreon.com/thought-to-action. We have plenty of new things happening. You'll have exclusive content, shows you can't see anywhere else, and our special Ask Us Anything sessions. You can also find more about Project Sentinel on our website, projectsentinel.net, the Herb London Center, londoncenter.org. And if you like what we're doing, please hit that subscribe button and join us for future programs. Once again, thank you very much for viewing and or listening, and make your day a great one.